Hi, I'm Louise Søndergaard. I will present a paper co-authored with Nadia, Campo, Woytuk. The paper's title is Feminist Posthumanist Design of Menstrual Care for More Than Human Bodies, and it's published at the SIGCHI conference in 2023. I'm working at the Oslo School of Architecture and Design in Norway, and Nadia is at the KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden. We present a research through design project called Menstrual and 3 workshops that bring more than human design into the domain of intimate care. The paper has 2 contributions. Firstly, we demonstrate how design of menstrual health can move beyond the human body to design for non-human ecologies that menstruating bodies are part of, such as soil, plants, animals, and water. Secondly, through workshop insights that affirm the fertile relations between feminist HCI and posthumanist HCI, we contribute to a feminist posthumanist design methodology that centers more than human bodies in intimate care. Our motivation came from a concern for how social stigma and human exceptionalism have led to unsustainable menstrual products that are both harmful to the environment and menstruating bodies. Simultaneously, we learned about online communities that use the nutrients in menstrual blood to fertilize soil. Nadia and I have collaborated for several years on designing feminist technologies for menstrual health. We started this research because we were curious about how menstrual care can extend to caring for non-human species and the environment, which are often ignored in human health. In our project called Menstrual, we designed a circular process. We used local materials to create menstrual artifacts, such as pads, tampons, and cups, that after use can be composted and bring the nutrients in menstrual blood into soil. This might later contribute to the growth of new plants, which source the materials for the next generation of menstrual products. We designed with biomaterials originating from species of sphagnum moss, wheat gluten, red cabbage, and seaweed, which are local to ecologies where we designed in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. We fabricated biodegradable menstrual pads that incorporate the properties of biomaterials. Sphagnum moss and wheat gluten act as a superabsorbent, seaweed acts as a bioplastic sheet, and red cabbage acts as an analog pH sensor, indicating the acidity of the vagina. We also designed 3D printed bottle connectors to store, mix, and pour menstrual blood into house plants and soil. And we created collages that imagine how other species, such as tardigrades and earthworms, live in the pads and aid in composting them. This design process is described in more detail in a pictorial published last year. We facilitated 3 design workshops to explore community and participatory potentials of Menstrual. We were curious what big biodegradable artifacts that different people would make. How would they think of menstrual care, and often private and individual activity, as a community practice involving non-human actors? How would different menstrual practices change their body's relations with environment? 20 participants joined the workshops, including women, men, and non-binary folks with and without lived experience of menstruation. The first workshop, Recipes for Menstrual Pads, was hosted at the gallery of the Design School in Oslo, Norway. The focus was on materiality and ecology, and the goal was not to make functional menstrual hygiene products, but to explore how biodesign with gluten, moss, and agar would change our relations to the products themselves, our body, and the environment. The second workshop, Menstrual Carrier Bags, was hosted at the Food Lab in Linnaeus University in Växjö, Sweden. In collaboration with Åsa Ståhl, we focused on designing menstrual practices of sustaining oneself and creating a surplus. We wanted to design containers that hold menstrual blood rather than only absorbing it. The third workshop, Fertility and Fertilizer, was hosted together with regenerative energy communities, also in Växjö. Here we focused on the afterlife of biodegradable menstrual pads and their potential to be composted in soil together with the collected menstrual fluid. We focused on digital and chemical fertility sensors and how sensing the fertility of soil fertilized with menstrual fluids might tell you something about your own health.
We analyzed the data documenting the workshops and drew out workshop insights on how to design with and for the menstruating body in relation to ecology. We will focus on the first and the third insight. The first insight emphasizes a shift from sustainable menstrual products to more than human menstrual care practices. Instead of designing traditionally shaped menstrual products, where the only change would be exchanging an unsustainable material for a more sustainable one, the participants radically reimagine the shapes, relations, and practices involved in menstrual care to go beyond the individual human being. The menstrual artifacts had uncommon forms, such as the shape of a bike seat, a pad mimicking the outer anatomy of a vulva, or a chair. This created new interactions beyond the objects themselves, for instance, by attending to the locations from which the materials came from and where they might later end up. Designing for more than human menstrual care practices invites menstruating bodies to notice the porosity and leakiness of their bodies, including considering the non-human actors that come in close contact or even inside their bodies, reflecting on where their bodily materials and these menstrual technologies go after use, and what ecologies these might harm or nourish. The third insight emphasizes the importance of designing for neglected and stigmatized relations. Building on the more than human relations that the menstruating body is part of, this insight emphasizes the relations between things, matters, subjects, that at first sight perhaps do not have much to do with each other because they have been neglected or stigmatized. For example, the relation between menstrual blood and soil fertility, or the relation between sphagnum moss and vaginal acidity. Participants had the desire to learn about and trace these relations between menstruating bodies and soil and plant bodies. When participants became aware of such relations, they became eager and curious to design biomaterials that could notice and support them, for instance by making pH-sensitive objects to show the similar pH value between the vagina and sphagnum moss. Designing for these neglected relations can challenge both social stigmas and human exceptionalism by inspiring care for the environment. We end the paper by firstly calling for inclusive understandings of technology, beyond the new, the digital, the high-tech, which is necessary for designing equitable and vibrant worlds. Secondly, we discuss the more than human materiality involved in biomaterials and reproductive health, through the agency and temporality of, for example, mosses and menstrual blood. Lastly, we discuss how this project contributes towards feminist posthuman design for more than human bodies. We make the relation between feminist HCI and posthumanist HCI explicit and show how such an alliance can be generative for design practices that situate human embodiment in ecology. We argue that the posthuman needs feminism, and that designing with more than human bodies is a starting point. This conceptual understanding of human bodies as more than human goes beyond menstrual care into other areas of intimate and bodily care, and possibly beyond, into the ways our human bodies and health can enter into caring relations with non-human species, ecologies, and environments, including technologies. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our funders and our collaborators. We invite you to read our paper for more insights and stories. Thanks.